Welcome everybody to another shocking episode of Lockdown 23 in 1. That's right, today we're going to be talking about Nicolae Miu. He was just sentenced the other day for fatally stabbing a 17-year-old while on a tubing trip. Not to mention stabbing and slashing a couple other people. And there's some videos out there showing the situation, but today we're going to be reading the complaint. Witness testimonies of what they seen when it all occurred. Not to mention what the officer witnessed when he rolled up to the crime scene. Also, like I said, he was found guilty and we will be witnessing his sentencing as well. Hear what the judge has to say about everything before he lays down the law. So let's get right into it. If you're new to the channel and enjoy, hit that like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave. And check out my playlist with many more videos for you to start watching today. Now, before I start reading the complaint, let me just say I went to prison for stabbing someone. Yeah, man, believe it or not, I thought I was acting in self-defense. Turns out I kinda was, but wasn't at the same time. So they hit me with unlawful wounding. Luckily, the guy didn't die, or else I'd probably still be in prison. I just thought that'd be something important to say before I start giving my 2 cents on this case. Now, let's get into the complaint. It says on July 30th, 2022 at 15:47 hours, St. Croix County Emergency Communications Center started to receive 911 calls about a stabbing that had occurred on the Apple River near Sunrise Bridge in town of Somerset. Later, reports from 911 calls indicated that there were potentially 4 to 5 victims. Reports indicated one victim's intestines were hanging from their body. And the first thing I said to myself, if that was the case, then he wasn't just doing a poke. He had to have poked and kind of ripped. Not to mention, all this took place on the river. I've never been on it, but I've been on rafts and tubing missions on plenty other rivers. And usually, if you get into a major situation out there, man, you could die. And someone having their intestines hanging out, man, that must have been a terrifying situation. But it said reports indicated one victim's intestines were hanging from their body. Upon arrival of the initial responding deputies, one victim was found without vital signs and with a puncture wound to his upper abdomen near his left breast. And that was the 17-year-old that lost his life. Sad, sad, sad. Deputies started to perform life-saving measures on victim 1 prior to being passed along to EMS. Victim 1 was later pronounced deceased at Lakeview Hospital in Stillwater, Minnesota. Other victims were victim 2, who had a slash wound to his abdomen and was exposing internal organs from the inside of his body. That's the individual with intestines hanging out. Victim 3, who had a stab wound to his lower left abdomen. And victim 4, who had a laceration on his stomach and a puncture wound to his upper left torso. Also, victim 5, who had a stab wound to their upper left side abdomen. That's a lot of people getting stabbed. Look, this is what that tells me, man. They had to all been very close to him. Not knowing he had a knife and he just started poking everyone in sight. Because usually if you see one person get stabbed, what does most people do? They get the hell out of Dodge. So first, right off the break, that's my 2 cents. All them individuals were like surrounding him. And in the video, you can kind of see it. That's why this case is so tricky to many, because a lot of people believe he should have beat it on self-defense. Others feel like he acted out of anger. He used too much force. I recommend y'all go watch a video wherever you can find it after I read the complaints and come up with your own conclusion. It says responding deputies on the scene learned of a suspect description as an older male with gray hair, weighing approximately 250 pounds, wearing a chain-style necklace and described as Russian-looking. What exactly is Russian-looking? I'm not quite sure. Someone said that to me when I was in prison. What are you, Russian, bro? I'm like, nah, I don't think Russians look like this, do they? When I'm thinking of Russians, I'm thinking about the ones I seen on Call of Duty, right? Not to mention they're sipping a little bit of vodka in my mind. Either way, it continues saying information was the suspect had ran back upriver and entered the woods on the western bank of the river. Responding deputies established a perimeter of the area. I spoke with Sandra, who explained to me she left her home in Prior Lake, Minnesota, and arrived with her husband Nicolae at the river's edge at 10:45 hours. Sandra stated that their vehicle was parked at the river's edge campground and that none of her group were camping, only floating the river and later leaving. Sandra explained that they started at River's Edge Campground and started their float at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Sandra explained during their float the only person that left the group she was with was her husband Nicolae, who left to try and find a member of their party's phone that was lost. Sandra explained that Nicolae donned some scuba gear and was in the water looking for a phone. Sandra stated that she observed a group of guys where Nicolae was looking on their tubes before returning to her briefly and Nicolae stated he was going to go back over where he was looking for the phone again. Sandra stated the second time Nicolae went back to the group of males near where he was looking for the phone, the guys got off their tubes and started hitting Nicolae. Sandra said after seeing this, she yelled to the two members of their party, Ariel and Ernesto. Hopefully I pronounced them right. They started running towards Nicolae and the fight. Sandra stated that all she heard was screaming, and that Nicolae, Ariel, and Ernesto came walking back. Sandra stated she did not see what happened, but she did say that Ariel and Ernesto were never involved in the confrontation. And by the time they had got to Nicolae, he was already on his way back to Sandra's location. I asked Sandra if Nicolae was known to carry a weapon with him. Sandra stated Nicolae had a knife in his pocket, wasn't very big, and stated that Nicolae told her those guys grabbed it from him. Sandra stated that Nicolae told her that they swung the knife at him, and that he grabbed it and moved it away. Sandra stated that she didn't think Nicolae was there long enough to harm anyone, and estimated for about 5 minutes. Sandra explained that Nicolae's knife was clipped onto his pocket. Sandra rubbed her left thigh while describing where Nicolae's knife was located. And look, all these words are going to have a huge significance in the courtroom. Already did, because he was already found guilty. But either way, always remember that. Every last word, especially when it comes to murder or something crazy like this, man, every last word can be held against you in the court of law. Now, this is the flip side of things, all right? From the people that were near the tubers. It says through investigation interviews of witnesses and victims indicated that a male was bothering a group of juveniles on their tubes. The group of juveniles were yelling for help from other individuals floating down the river nearby. Now, I know someone's going to mention this in the comment section, so I might as well tap into it a little bit. But in other articles I've read, it says that someone in the crowd was accusing Nicolae of being some kind of kid predator. But it doesn't matter where you're at, man. If you were to say something like that to some people, man, it's going to trigger them. Take things to a whole nother level. Witnesses stated that a group of people came and stood in between Nicolae and the group of juveniles. Witness statements indicate that Nicolae was being spoke to in a half-moon shape, with an easy route to escape the confrontation, so he wasn't completely surrounded. They were just all kind of surrounding him just in the front. And that's a huge part, because in my case, it sent me to prison. Look, the judge said the same thing. You could have ran. You could have ran and called the cops. You weren't completely blocked. But it continues saying witnesses described Nicolae as punching or slapping a female that was in the group confronting him. And that's when everything jumped off. It says Nicolae was then punched by a male and fell into the river. Witnesses then described Nicolae began stabbing multiple individuals who were near him. Witness statement described the knife used as an approximate 3-inch silver blade with a silver clip handle and folding. Located near where the incident took place, back upstream a short distance along the west bank of the river, was the knife. Also located in the river were multiple tubes tied together. One tube appeared to have a bloody piece of human flesh attached. That tube was also secured along with other items believed to be from victims. Now keep in mind, this was the initial complaint. There was a lot more details that played into his guilty verdict. If you want to run back the trial, go ahead. It's on YouTube somewhere. But right now, we're bypassing all of that, straight into the judge handing down the sentence.
The sentence must be based on the facts of the case and the law, not personal considerations, passions, or prejudices. But judges in Wisconsin have a great deal of discretion when imposing a sentence. Unlike many jurisdictions, we do not have sentencing guidelines or grids to follow. I want all of you to know that I have given this case a great deal of thought. I take my responsibility seriously. There is nothing more difficult or more solemn than imposing a sentence on another human being. As far as the gravity of the offense, the jury has spoken. Any efforts to relitigate this case are simply without merit. I firmly believe that the American criminal justice system is the best ever devised. It's not perfect, but I cannot think of a system of justice that is better at finding the truth while preserving the rights of the accused. In this case, 12 jurors reached a unanimous verdict. These 12 jurors were selected from a panel of more than 150 people. I, along with the attorneys for both sides, chose these jurors because they could be fair and impartial. The jurors came from all corners of our great county. They came from all walks of life. They were men, they were women, they were young, they were old. They listened to 8 days of intense trial testimony. They examined dozens of exhibits. They deliberated for 8 hours. In the end, they reached a unanimous verdict and found beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Miu was guilty of reckless homicide, reckless endangerment, and battery. Now, there are 2 key takeaways from this jury's verdict that I want to mention. First, the jury rejected the state's claim that Mr. Miu intended to kill Isaac Schumann or the surviving stabbing victims. In other words, the jury rejected the most serious crimes that would have sent Mr. Miu to prison for the rest of his life. Second, the jury rejected Mr. Miu's claims of self-defense. That means Mr. Miu did not reasonably believe that he was preventing or terminating an unlawful interference with his person, or he did not reasonably believe the force used was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself. This jury found Mr. Miu guilty of reckless homicide and 4 counts of reckless endangerment. These crimes are serious. They mean that Mr. Miu did not think about the consequences of his behavior and that he showed utter disregard for life when he stabbed 5 people. For that, he will be held accountable, but the court sentence must reflect the reality that it was reckless conduct that the jury found him guilty of, not intentional conduct, which is punishable much more harshly. Taking life and endangering the lives of others are 2 crimes that warrant significant punishment. Punishment for what Mr. Miu did, but also punishment that recognizes who he is and the circumstances of his crimes. Here, that punishment will involve the loss of liberty, because anything else would depreciate the seriousness of his crimes. So at this time, I will impose the following sentence on Mr. Miu. For count 1, I will impose a term of initial confinement of 20 years, followed by 6 years of extended supervision. For count 2, involving Anthony Carlson,
Smoked.
5 years initial confinement, followed by 5 years of extended supervision. Count 3, involving Dante Carlson, 5 years of initial confinement, followed by 5 years of extended supervision. Count 4, Alexander Martin, 6 years of initial confinement, followed by 5 years of extended supervision. Count 5, Riley Madison, 5 years initial confinement, followed by 5 years of extended supervision. Count 6, Madison Cohen, 270 days of jail. Mr. Miu is not eligible for challenge incarceration program or the earned release program due to his age and the nature of these offenses. The sentences on all 6 counts will run concurrent. I am imposing a concurrent sentence because Mr. Miu's conduct toward each of his victims was part of a single continuous act over a short period of time. The periods of confinement take into consideration Mr. Miu's entire behavior, not just the behavior directed at any one particular individual.
But that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, on how a little tubing adventure on the river could end in 20 years in prison. Not to mention a 17-year-old with a bright future losing his life and multiple people being injured. Regardless of how everything played out, my condolences go out to all the families. Very sad situation, but I will say this, man, the judge, he conducted that sentencing perfectly. Because it can be tricky sentencing someone where a lot of people feel as though he's innocent. But just to close it out, there's a few major things that we can get from this. 1, be careful acting in self-defense. You can land yourself in prison the rest of your life. There's a lot of technicalities that come into play when you snatch someone else's. Secondly, be careful you have an interaction with. They could be carrying a 3-inch blade for the last 15 years, but today's the day he decides to use it. be careful, you never know. And third of all, if you ever want to happen to carry a weapon for protection, you better think about this case before you pull it out. Once you have a weapon, man, it's much easier to open the window to use it. But ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I got plenty more content coming your way. I believe tomorrow we're going to be jumping in, I think it might be a Wisconsin prison. 8 employees, including the warden, has been brought up on charges for the death of an inmate. Ain't gonna believe why, ladies and gentlemen, so stay tuned for that. And the only way to do so is by hitting that notification bell, setting it to all. Until the next time, though, as always, ladies and gentlemen, y'all be easy, be safe, and more importantly than anything, stay free.